Hello, everybody. We are here. I'm still not very good at this whole live thing. So welcome to Mastering the Drop, a real view of recovery, where we are taking a journey towards loving and honoring ourselves, making ourselves the priority and taking care of ourselves from the inside out. This month, as you may or may not know, we've been focusing on the levels of addiction. The pressure of comparison, which means we are talking about what addiction and recovery look like, and how not all addiction is the same, and why no two stories are the same, and how all of these severity levels really do vary. So today, and you're going to meet my very special friends here in just one moment, but today we're talking about those treatment options, and we're going to be telling you all about how there is truly something for absolutely everyone and every level of need. So we're going to be looking at everything from traditional inpatient to all the way through to lifestyle informed options, because we know that everybody is definitely aware of where to go or how to get help when the severity levels have taken over and life has ceased to function. However, knowing what options to choose, where is the best fit for optimum results, and how to incorporate them upon completion can get pretty tricky. And it's even more confusing when you have moderate to low severity treatment needs. So we're going to be focusing heavily on what to do when you don't know or don't need to leave where you currently are, or when you're functioning in your life, but you just feel trapped and in a cycle that's no longer serving you. And we're going to talk about what to do and where to go when the battle does not entail a chemical dependency. So without further ado, let me please introduce you to two people that I love working with, and I enjoy our collaborative relationship and how we've really been able to embrace, collaboration over competition. And if you've been following along with Mastering the Drop, you've already met Rebecca LeMasters. Rebecca, wave. She's my guru when it comes to connecting those dots, when it comes to creating and cultivating and nourishing collaborative relationships, and she's just amazing at bringing the right people together. And then we have Mr. Pat Ochoa, who is somebody that I've been able to utilize and refer people to, and really be able to know, trust, and like when people that come to me don't fit my method or model of care needs. So we will all be dropping our contact us information in there just at the very end, so that if you want to connect with me, you'll know how. If you want to connect with Pat, you'll know how. If you want to connect with Rebecca, you'll know how, because we're all here. So all of that information will be dropped in. But I think there's a really important, very seamless way to kind of launch this and this conversation. And so I wanted to do that, Pat, by asking you to share about the efficacy of a sober living model, and why in today's world that is so important. Because I know and I know, and Rebecca knows, but other people may not be understanding why it is so hard to get the length of care needs, right? And how that sober living model can really be effective.
Yeah, thank you, Tricia, for inviting me to your live show today. It's an honor and privilege to be here, and it's good to see you, Rebecca. It's good to see Rebecca like in action, right? Like when addiction, like when you work in the field of addiction, it's like when the phone calls, you're in your car on your way. No matter what, like that's what we do, out there saving lives. And it's just good to see you in action. So it's good to be with y'all. the sober living model, I mean, I think the first thing I really want to say is statistics show that the longer the longer that an individual is in structured living, the higher success rate for that individual. And so, I think Rebecca will talk on it a lot, but the clients that come to me, or clients or patients, however you want to see, it will tend to come from a residential facility. Now, I do get calls that are for a crisis, which then you get to kind of figure out what level of care they need. But you don't have me talking on that, so I'll talk on my topic. But it's so when I get a call from a residential treatment center that's looking for sober living, what they're saying is that this client needs longer term care, right? This client isn't able to necessarily go home, and a lot of those things are they don't have the family support, they don't have the peer support. They were homeless when they came to treatment, right? So they have nowhere to live. In and out of jail, still have, probation and things like that to take care of. So they need that extra support in order to put a wraparound program around them. The sober living structure is going to give them that peer support immediately. They're going to come into sober living. They're going to be surrounded by their peers. They're going to have the support that they're going to need. They're going to have the structure that they need. There's rules at the house. In addiction, a lot of times what we see is someone that has no boundaries and structure around them. And so it's very loose to do what they want. A lot of patients that come to us are still reacting from an adolescent place. If we look at the adolescent, what does an adolescent need? They need boundaries and structure. So when we put that in their lives, there's a level of safety that comes for them to then be able to enter into recovery, which is, therapists, nutrition coaches, counselors, right? These kinds of people that if they feel safe internally, like their needs are met, housing, food, and those kind of things, then they feel safe enough to do the work. So they do the work, then they have that safe environment at home with their peers. So it's kind of the sober living overall. I could go more into it, but really, like, the structure is important for our addicts and mental health clients as well.
So, just to bring in a little bit of validation here with that, the detox residential period, and the way that we used to know it back in the day was it would go 30, 60, 90, and sometimes longer when somebody posed that level of severity, right? That high level of severity, and not having the support at home, and really needing a lot of life intervention. So that's kind of thing of the past, and insurance is really supporting getting people stabilized, which is that initial 14 to 30 day calming period, right? Removing the substance, whatever it might be. And then they're saying, hey, you're going to have to go out and find what you need. And hopefully that the program that these that the person, the patient, the client is engaged with has a really good has really good collaborative relationships with people like yourself, who can then connect them with an effective sober living situation or program, or and I'll bring in my piece for that, just a little bit, like a treatment transition to life person. Now, again, the level of severity is key and critical in there, right? So my clients that come to work with me after a 30-day, they didn't have that high level of severity. They just needed an intervention to quit opening the refrigerator and reaching for a beer, right? And they're totally capable of going back to work and engaging with their children and their spouses, but they just need that thing. We're talking about with you is once they've got that stabilization period, we still need to give them a whole new way of living. And to do that, we want to get them in this sober living atmosphere that lasts, and I don't even want to say they're 90 days, because I know a lot of them go a year, and I think that is amazing. That is awesome, especially with post-acute withdrawal, which a whole different topic that we could have a conversation on, because that lasts for 2 years, right? So,
Right.
so talk about how you choose, because I know a lot of the stuff you do is like also going, it's not healthy for them to even go to a sober living in their own community. Like,
Right.
how do you know when you need to do a complete geographical relocation?
So like I had a client or patient come call me today, from out of state, had no support. The only relationship he had was with an unhealthy girlfriend, the very codependent relationship. And he's been to multiple treatment centers in his area, and he kept going back to his girlfriend, who would then they would end up doing drugs together and then back in treatment. So with that kind of case, there was a lot of trauma that he had. So what we provide at Slow Recovery Center is structured sober living, but we also provide outpatient services, with two separate tracks being addiction and mental health. He was coming to us stabilized, right? The heroin was removed, so his addiction was stabilized, and his mental health was stabilized on medication. At that point, his therapist felt it would be best that he did some outpatient services. So to remove him away from the unhealthy relationship, which was his girlfriend, put him around peers that are supportive. Now he has a supportive community around him. Now he has the therapy that's needed with a therapist, counseling, and groups at the outpatient setting. We're going to remove him out of his situation. So I see this happens all the time. Our sober living, when you get into the outpatient setting, you may get 90 days of clinical services, but sober living at that point, at 60 days, that client is back into working in the working environment. So he's working, he's providing his own bills. At that point, there's that self-esteem's being built, his self-worth's being built, and then he can stay in sober living for up to a year. We also provide sober apartments for our families that are after a year able to go and have an apartment by themselves with their family, and they can stay up to there for an extra year, depending on where they feel the support is for themselves. Right. It being individualized treatment, we really encourage, what are your goals? What is it that you want to obtain? And allowing them to dictate their treatment process rather than what they've been told their whole life. This is what you're going to do. When they're bought into that, they're bought into the process of recovery, then they begin to recover.
I think that's one of the reasons that you and I work so well together is that thought process alone, right? Like if you're bum rushing somebody and you're saying, this is where you're going, like it or not, the model or the method or the modality doesn't speak to you, then ultimately they're not going to be successful, right? So this is something that I think is, truly important. And this is why, we can't, as practitioners, say, we can help anybody, because I know that there are people that I can't help, right? Like, and my method and my modalities won't meet their needs or won't speak their language, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important, which, and we'll circle back around to you, Pat, because I have a couple other questions I would ask you, but I think this is a really good time. And Rebecca, I know you're driving, but if it's not too much to ask, because you are kind of at that super front line, like before they get to a me or they get to a Pat, like where you're kind of like, which facility is going to speak this person's language, where you kind of get to know that person before they even go. How do you help somebody determine, what program might?
We're gonna lag a little bit there for a second.
What was that?
Sorry, you might have lost. I was just thinking you might have lost me for a second.
Yeah.
And, apologize for that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead, Pat, I'm going to go ahead and mute her because she's not even in a spot where she can hear us. So when I meet somebody and I need to place them and I don't have a referral, I would go to Rebecca. And I'm assuming that that's kind of a situation for you as well. Maybe not. perhaps you have, perhaps you have a bigger, reach.
Yeah. So I get a lot of calls as Rebecca, crisis calls. I live in Southern California. Our programs in Portland, Oregon. I establish relationships with people, but like I get calls on the East Coast, Midwest. I call Rebecca. Rebecca is, she's awesome. She knows so many people in that area. She's such a go-to in that area, which is just, we need each other, right? We need each other. Like the
Coast to coast.
the more arms that I have out, right, the better it is to place. And it's being able to assess that client, to assess the needs that they have. Not every program is the right fit, like you said. Sometimes, I had a client last week. She came to me and had a marijuana problem. Well, after doing a pre-assessment, she needed psychiatric hospitalization. And so, and you got to be able to assess the person that's calling, because they're always going to minimize what it is. A lot of times they'll come with depression and anxiety, no real drug and alcohol use. And then you get on the phone with them and they're a full-blown heroin addict, so you
absolutely. It sometimes takes us a minute to uncover all the layers and the levels and the textures and the everything. And if you don't know the right way to ask, because, and I love that you brought up, even though you finished it with uncovering a chemical addiction, there are issues that people don't know where to go. And this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, because we're talking about food addiction. We're talking about codependency. We're talking about, being, so consumed by the diet culture, or, we have issues with impulsive shopping and things like that. But we also may have, low level alcohol misuse, right? Like these are my peeps all day long. The people pleasing codependent that, just is overbooking their calendar, and there really isn't a treatment program out there that's like designated, like, they don't need to leave home. They need to actually figure out how to function in their life inside their home. And
Right.
This is something that I'm super passionate about, because as a woman that was faced with that in my life, big time, yet my story is super long, and sure, I had a lot of those different levels of severity in and around, my early 20s. But, as somebody in my 40s, where do you go? Right. So, that's something that, I want people to know, like, you don't have to have a chemical, an actual full blown, addiction to a chemical substance. It may be very low level, but, your major severities are, again, with that, that binging, that restricting, that overindulgence, that might be, binge use disorder, right? Like if we were to give it a, clinical term, and it's, once or twice a month, I go out and I just trash myself with alcohol or, overindulging in food or whatever. And you don't need to leave your life, reach out. I've got, I've got what you need, because I hear you and I understand you, but there's also, and I don't know if Rebecca has better signal now. It looks like she does.
I think I'm good.
There are so many other levels. Like we have to be able to discern where these folks need to go. When is it appropriate to allow them to do it at home? Kind of thing.
And I apologize. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to, I just lost signal there right around that turn. I knew that was going to happen, but I think that, I think everything that you both have said, collaborate the beginning and the end and the middle and the end. And I think that one thing we haven't touched on, like you said, was, the home component, because that's where a lot of people are wanting to stay now, because they have, the pandemic has also spoken to that. With us being professionals, we know that more people are wanting to stay home. So how do we handle that when someone has addictive behaviors and we know that they need treatment, but yet they're not able to leave, the home? So a lot of people have transitioned into telehealth. And obviously I can use both of your services, yours, Trisha, for the aftercare component, even after sober living, that is your component is of longevity. Pat's also, he does represent the sober living model, but he also is a great person to connect with, the youth and younger adults and talk to them offline. And there's something that we have to do as a referent, and that's where I kind of step in. I can be called on in the beginning when by the person or the professional or the family member, when they're in the midst of addiction, and I can put them in a detox, help them or transition them or navigate the detox, the treatment program. But then I try to stay in touch with them and also do that full continuum of care, because it goes from myself and then the treatment center. And then I'm talking with the family the whole time, or the loved ones, or the job, EAPs, union workers. I mean, there's so many people out there that I connect with, but I'm also always talking to them and connecting them, the support system with you as the professional while the person is getting healthy. And then, they can transition over. If you take that component out and you just stick to the home component, then that's when I probably reach out to you and say, what experience have you had with this? You and I had that conversation. If it's someone that has, a substance abuse issue, such as alcohol, that's very dangerous. You really should be under the care of a medical professional. You can die from trying to detox from alcohol and different substances. A lot of the general public doesn't know that. And a lot of people that try to go through detox themselves don't know that. So we have to get that out, right? Just like, it's in service, we have to say. But in saying that, there are people that are on certain substances, or they're suffering from, like you said, bouts of mania, where they're shopping or they're eating, and maybe they don't have to go into, a long-term facility, and they are going to want to stay home. And, you have those programs set up where you can work with them, yourself and a nutritionist and, a physician, maybe having a nurse on board, and having someone who is, the psychology side of it, all of those components can be a great home therapy. And I don't want to take away from that, because I think people forget about that,
Yeah, you're right. And I generally don't have that level of severity, but, we were talking about that the other day. It's important that, how much, how often, and for how long somebody's been using. And if you can determine that it's been a, short period of time, and you do, like I generally do, which is bring an addiction medicine specialist in on board, so that, there's somebody monitoring their physical body, that physical health, the blood pressure, the, organ function and things like that, then sure. Then, as long as those things are being monitored, then it can happen if they're not home alone, because being home alone is not safe. Even if they represent like, hey, I can monitor my own blood pressure, you don't know when that seizure or that crash may kick in. And so, you really have to, if you're somebody listening that's saying, I want to do this at home alone, like, you have to be willing to not be alone, right? Like, because you can't. And that might mean, going to a day program that's partial hospitalization and letting a nurse monitor your vitals all day long, so that they know that you're safe. They know what to send you home with to keep you stabilized overnight. So that's another level of care, right? Like, you can have a coach, you can be working with myself, you can be working with Pat, you can be staying at home, but during the daytime, you need to be in a partial hospitalization type setting where, maybe you're getting some IV bags or some vitamins or, whatever it is, that the medical provider, the practitioners that know what your particular situation is, whether it's alcohol, heroin, benzodiazepines for anxiety, there's different protocols. And if it's depression, like if even if it's very low level chemical, but we're having these high levels of depression and debilitating anxiety with panic, like a partial hospitalization setting isn't a bad thing. Like it's almost spa-like. Most of them have, programming. You're in there with other people. It's very quiet. It's very serene. You're getting pampered a little bit with, by a nurse. And again, it's about knowing how to pick the right one to match the person's needs. And I think all three of us have the capability of doing that. It's whether or not people are willing, like, I wanted to do this at home by myself. I don't want anybody to know. Well, sometimes it's just not safe.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to kind of get back to is kind of transition into that conversation, that there are PHPs, there are IOPs. So I think that traditionally when people hear like at home, they think it's me, the TV, sweating it out, doing, you know what I mean? Like that's not what professionals are really talking about when they say that. It's kind of the wrong connotation to even use like the at-home detox model. And I've been hearing that more and more lately, because of, I think, the unique living style that we're in. You really do. You have to have those professionals on board. You're just in the comfort of your home during the time period, that you would maybe be spending the night in a residential setting. But then again, I'm always going to be on board. You're going to be on board. Pat's going to be on board for that phone call for those people where they don't have that support system and that's not going to work. And, I don't think any of us are going to suggest that type of model. I try not to suggest anything. I try to listen to whoever is the caller. And I try to just, whatever the individualized care is, what that model is, then those are the professionals that I reach out to, and some people always ask me, they're like, okay, so where do you refer to all the time? That I can't say that to you because the phone calls are so different that I can say that I have a great relationship with you. I have a great relationship with Pat. There are people that I do trust because I work with them more often than others. And I think the skill set is broader. The experience is a little bit more ingrained, but there's no one that I, turn to or refer to like every patient to, because there's just not a program that's a good fit for everyone.
And I don't think and I think if anybody has come across, or knows, has heard that, like, oh, this is the way this works. You go here and then you go there and then you go here. And it's every single person that comes in does the same thing. Like you want to be questioning that. I think,
it's very
cookie cutter. I think our little radars need to be going off because, and I know everybody's like, oh, not cookie cutter this or not, standardize that. But you've got to really be your own advocate. You've got to be looking at that because even though like mine, in my program, like we utilize the same system, right? I utilize the same system for everybody. However, it's set up in a way that it gets to be personalized for each person. And I don't take every person like, hey, you know what? We're not a good fit. Let me refer you to Pat. And I've done that. Like you were saying, the younger adults, right? That, not my forte, hey, mm-hmm. Pat, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this person? Right.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, like,
I think what's important, something that Rebecca said was to listen to the client, right? To listen to the person on the phone call. Like I know my experience is that the addict, the person that's struggling just wants someone to listen, right? How many hours do we spend on the phone just listening to their story? And if thank God it's not a cookie cutter approach because, right, when I listen, the needs for this person are going to be different for somebody else. But I also think what's important when I listen is to hear what level of willingness that client or patient has. What will, like, how much willingness does that person have? And they're making the call, right? So there's the willingness there. And then, it's like I had a girl on the phone and she was only willing to do coaching. Well, I knew that she needed to detox off the substance that she was on before, right, we could really do any type of work. But the coaching began, and once the rapport was built, right, then I could say, hey, let's get into some detox and and detox yourself. And so she did, but we're like, okay, you need to be stabilized for mental health. She wasn't willing to do that. She wanted to do outpatient services. So she did outpatient. That was her level of willingness. So let's use that willingness. We put her in outpatient services. She drank right away, and she hid her drinking for a month, right? At that point, she got to a place where her willingness said, I need to address my mental health. So then at that point, she was willing to go into a residential program, right, to be stabilized, where she is now. And I talked to her the other day and she said, thank you for meeting me where I'm at, right? Because everybody tries to force me into a position that I'm not willing to do. And when I feel forced, the middle fingers come up, the wall comes out, I push you away like I pushed everyone else away in my life. Thank you for meeting where I'm at. I'm in the right place. And I said, we could have saved a lot of pain. And she said, but I know, but I needed the journey to get to where I'm at. So that stuff was inside. That wasn't anything anyone was telling. The solutions we have are internally anyways, right? My job as a coach, right, to build rapport and to motivate them in the direction that they want to go in.
100%.
And it's, yeah.
100%. And I have many cases like that myself where it's, I just want to, get control of my drinking, right? Like I don't, because I have a lot of, before COVID, I used to call my stay-at-home moms, that as soon as they got the kids and the husbands off to school, they had their little wine bottles in the back of the closet inside their gym bag. Like we're trying to just remove those and keep their nighttime wine, right? And sometimes it would take, 3-6 months before, because then they'd have those days where, overindulge. And then you're like, I did it again. And the anxiety comes back and they're like, I don't know why I'm all anxious. And I'm like, well, you're drinking in the middle of the day again. Like, this is why. But, and so you have to meet everybody where they are. And then, because sometimes they don't know what they want their life to look, feel, and be like. They just know that how it is right now doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good, isn't functioning or operating the way they want. And so, we got to help them find their motivation, listen to what it is that they're saying, and help them make some identifications themselves. Rebecca,
I think sometimes I was going to say, I think sometimes too, we need to also have that conversation with their support system, if that's available, because the support system, if you're not the addict, but you're the person calling in for that person, or you're the family dynamic, or, you want them to be in a place where you're not hurting anymore for what they're doing. You can't really you can't take yourself out of that position because you're hurting yourself. So you have to really explain to them, the harder you push, something's going to break. So you really have to, remember to support the family dynamic, support the husband, the wife, and like I said, like the employers, you have to educate the whole system around this person as well as the person. And I think that you both are very good professionals to also do that, because you offer a full continuum of care where you can be working with that dynamic while the actual person is doing that individualized program, and that makes a big difference in the success and the longevity of recovery, because recovery is a lifestyle. And, all three of us are kind of like lifestyle coaches. You have to change your lifestyle to continue this way. And, your family, your work, your home environment. Sometimes people go to treatment, like Pat was saying, they'll go to Portland, Oregon, they don't want to come back. They don't want to come back to even their home state, residential state, because, they've gained that lifestyle now, and they know to put themselves back in that position, it would, be detrimental to all the work that they've done. That's the point you want to get to, but you can't really get there, unless you're supporting all facets, of recovery. And that's why it's so important. I feel like this call is, I'm like the handshake, and then there's the treatment model, and then Pat's, he's, after they get out of treatment, he's like giving them their legs back, giving them, that look at life without substance. And then when they're starting to get that back, then they transition into your program, where you're life coaching and coaching nutrition and coaching anatomy and coaching environment, and I think that it takes all three of us. Even there's more professionals out there that could definitely, fit in those pieces, but that's what we have to do. We have to collaborate to create a recovery lifestyle. And it starts really dirty and really, really hard and rough. But then, the longer you work on something, that end product is so amazing. And we're all three, we all can speak to that with our personal stories. So.
And I think
that's so true.
Yeah, I think something you said that's important that we just kind of brushed over a little bit is the family component, right? It's like the identified patient being, X, and then his family, right? My experience is that when I work with X, that really identified patient tends to be the family, right? It tends to be the parents. And so like something that like on something we worked together, Tricia, was your strength with the parents, right? Like the relationship you had with them, which then allowed me to work with X, right? And so, but that family piece is so important that I think what I see happen in adult treatment a lot is that the family gets pushed to the side because the identified patient is X. But if the family doesn't change, then X goes back to the family, which hasn't done any work, and then the identified patient X then relapses, right? And so it's so important that we collaborate to this point where the family can get the support, right? I'm big about family, and I don't think it gets touched on enough in the treatment world with adults.
You're right. It doesn't. I mean, they have family day, and everything. And it's where they, people, they sit down and they talk about the patient in recovery. And it's like, and this is what I do with, with my parents, right? Parents with adult children or adolescent children that are in a recovery need situation, is that, we have to teach them how to live for themselves first without feeling guilty, selfish, punished, or restricted. And then that way they have that ability to lead by a different example, right? Like, continuing to do however it was you did with and it's not saying that it's the parent's fault that somebody is an addict, because it's not, but we have a conditioned way of functioning as a familial unit, right? And this is husband and wife, this is siblings, this is grandparents, this is the whole kit and caboodle, whatever your little sphere of influence looks like, right? Like everybody needs to be involved in one way, shape, or form or another, because we have developed over, whether it's 19 years, whether it's 25 years, whether it's 35 years, right? Like if you've got a 35-year-old with parents that are in their late 50s, like they have a lot of conditioned ways of interacting with each other. And we have to be able to work collaboratively as separately and as a unit to change that whole system. And the way that oh, bummer, she'll be back. It happens to her. So we need to, forage a new pathway for that functioning and the interaction and all of that between everything and in a way that honors each person as an individual, because that's what happens in families. Like we can look at a lot of different, levels of enmeshment, right? And
Yep.
we get lost in our family roles. And I know I can't say that I did, because there wasn't really anything wrong with my family when I got to, what was my bottom, which was, I could feel my liver working, right? But, it was more the way I perceived my family role and the pressures that I put on myself to fulfill these roles that nobody else was even thinking about, right? Like, they're like, what? But, so we have these, it's just something that can be improved.
And I think we could have a whole 40, because I know 45 minutes is coming up fast, right?
Yeah.
I think we could have a whole nother 45-minute discussion on the family, which I would love to be able to do with you, because I have so many thoughts on it. Because I see the family sabotaging treatment all the time. I do interventions. I see the family sabotages the intervention all the time. And so, I think it would be an awesome topic for us to talk about another time.
And so next week, we were going to be talking a little bit more specifically about modalities, right? Like, so not necessarily, what level of care, but the modalities, right? So mindfulness based, where it's meditation and stuff like that. Something that I'm super passionate about is, and this is not to bash any program or whatever, right? Like, I know everybody's got like their own financial capabilities or whatever, but, I think it's important that people, hear and understand that it's a nicety to have a private chef at a treatment facility. I mean, because even if you have an eating disorder, or disordered eating, or a food addiction, like, having a private chef is, maybe not necessarily serving you. Sure, it's a nicety, but it's not gonna do anything to provide you long-term, maintainability. Right. As are hot stone massages and I don't know, yoga, because I know that, for some people, so as a recovery nutrition coach, as a recovery fitness coach, and as a food addiction coach, I know that there's a level, right? Like, if you want to go someplace that, you're going to be doing all of these things, you better be making sure that medically you can be cleared to even engage in those things. So I want us to talk next week about, those things that are niceties and are totally okay to add into your thing, so long as you don't have some false pretense that it's actually an evidence-based practice to provide some sort of benefit, long-term, lifelong, manageable, maintainable. So we'll talk about that. But then absolutely, I think in May, it's a great time to start talking about the entire system, right?
Yeah.
Those family units. And so maybe we can, powwow about what we want to talk about, next month. And we can, put together, a nice little bullet point list. And so, I just want everybody to know, right? Like, I created Turning Leaves for the treatment transition to life, whatever level of treatment that is. It's that transitional period where, it's now what's next, right? Like, I'm going home to the same house, the same bills, the same spouse, the same kids, the same job, the same environment that I wasn't coping in, right? Like, I've got all this stability, I've got all this yay, hooray stuff, right? Like, I'm good, but I'm going back where it was. And so that's my sweet spot, as is those, those lower levels of severity that allow you to stay home, where you don't need other practitioners, although I will bring in partial hospitalization and medical doctors. But when we're talking about, residential, inpatient, sober living, all of these things, like, you can contact any one of us and we're going to be able to talk to you professionally. Oh, Rebecca can't hear. It's okay. So thank you for popping back in. But any one of us three is totally able to help you discern where is going to be a right fit for you. I know who's going to be a better personality fit for Pat than for me. I know who, I know I know different areas. Like I'm born and raised here in California. I know programs up and down, but I also know that Rebecca can help me with things, on the other side of the nation, as far as getting people connected with like-minded programs. But because we all have spent time learning and understanding what the different programs offer, if you want an unbiased opinion of you may want to start looking at, I know myself, I never give less than 3 recommendations or referrals. And and I'm sure Pat does very similar himself. So we are to sign off. Pat, I want to thank you. This has been so invigorating. Rebecca, I want to thank you for being out there, boots on the ground, doing whatever it is that you're working on today, because I know it's something amazing and great. And for everybody listening or watching the replay, we're going to drop in all of our contact information in the comments. This will also be streaming on YouTube, or not streaming, but the video will be put up and be live on YouTube, hopefully later on this afternoon. So anyway, feel free, shoot us questions.
Thank you so much, Tricia. It was an honor, a privilege to be with you today.
Thanks. It was great having you.
All right, so we'll talk later
about next week.
Awesome.
Thank you.